Ours is an industry that, like any other, is built upon iteration. Ideas are pioneered, others pick them up, build upon them, and take them to greater heights with new and more fleshed out efforts. But every once in a while, rather than following the norm, some developers choose to break tradition and try new and unique things, putting fresh spins on ideas that have existed for years, and in the process, giving them a completely different look and feel. In this feature, we're going to talk about 15 games that did just that. Super Smash Bros. The fighting genre is nearly as old as the medium of video games itself, and in a genre that is as ubiquitous and constant as this one, it's hard to innovate. When Super Smash Bros. Came out for the N64 in 1999, however, that was exactly what it did. How exactly? Well, on paper, the idea was a simple one. Rather than knocking your opponent's health down to zero, you just knock them off the stage. And yet that simple idea completely changed how we approached the game, injecting a kind of chaotic and frenetic energy into the proceedings the way not many fighters do. Death Stranding. Hideo Kojima has always been one for taking risks and trying new things, and when he broke off from Konami and Metal Gear, he decided to take his biggest risk ever. Death Stranding is, on paper, a big-budget AAA open-world game, but it is completely unlike anything else. Instead of placing an emphasis on combat and fetch quests and collectathons and clearing the fog of war, Death Stranding instead grounds you with its unique traversal mechanics, which it uses to emphasize exploration in a way that no other game has done. Add to that its simple yet brilliant asynchronous multiplayer gameplay, and what you have is a unique concoction that deserves all the plaudits for uniqueness it can get. ARMS. ARMS is unique because of not only the central gameplay mechanics, which ridiculously enough involve extendable arms controlled with motion controls, meaning the actual gameplay is far different than the up-close and personal style of melee combat in most other fighters, but also because of its unique perspective, which is basically the equivalent of an over-the-shoulder third-person game. It adds entirely new strategies and considerations regarding placement and the like to fighting, all of which is also helped by the stages themselves being a dynamic part of the fights. The Pathless. The Pathless is a game that lives up to its name. Set in a vast open world, it places an almost non-existent emphasis on combat, and instead puts all of its eggs in the traversal and exploration basket. What really helps it nail that bold idea is just how excellent the game's traversal mechanics are, which allows players to flit and zip through its sizable world in incredibly satisfying fashion. The complete lack of any map markers or compass markers, or even a map, also means that exploration is completely diegetic, which sadly isn't something a lot of open-world games can boast of. Metroid Prime. Unlike other Nintendo mainstays like Zelda and Mario, Metroid's jump from 2D to 3D was quite belated, but when it came, it took all of our breaths away. Reimagining Metroid as a first-person shooter was a bold move by Retro and Nintendo, but one that paid off. And that's largely because Metroid Prime isn't really much of a shooter at all. It de-emphasizes shooting or any skill necessary for shooting. There's a hard lock-on, so shooting is not the point. The point is exploring and traversing the world. The shooting is just how you're interacting with that world. This is combined with the level design and progression mechanics that are obviously right out of a Metroidvania, which again is not a style that is common to shooters. Dreams. It's hard to even classify Dreams as a game. What it is a gamified game development engine, which, looking at Media Molecule's history as developers, makes perfect sense. After popularizing the play, create, share philosophy with the Little Big Planet series, Media Molecule took that idea to ridiculous lengths with their long-in-development PS4 exclusive. The level of depth, flexibility, and complexity that Dreams has on offer is simply staggering. But what's even more impressive is how it wraps all of that up in an accessible and user-friendly package. Pardon the pun here, but it plays like an absolute dream. Splatoon. When Nintendo decided to enter the competitive multiplayer shooter space, they did so in typically weird fashion. In most competitive shooters, missing your target and spraying your bullets is the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. In Splatoon, however, missing and spraying is the entire point. This zany paintball simulator is all about covering more of the map in paint than the opposing team, and it's absolutely ridiculous and wonderful. Wii Sports. The introduction of Waggle motion controls with the Wii, there was no shortage of curiosity about how they would effectively implement those controls in games. Right off the bat, they delivered an excellent tech demo in Wii Sports. It was essentially just a collection of minigames with extremely simplistic visuals and next to no production values. But its accessible and ridiculously enjoyable nature turned Wii Sports into an absolute phenomenon. Motion controls may not have been the next big thing, as so many at the time predicted they would become, but Wii Sports definitely deserves its place in the history books of this industry. Shadow of the Colossus. What's the worst thing you can call an open-world game's map? Empty, desolate, devoid of things to do? Well, people say that about Shadow of the Colossus all the time, and yet it's hardly ever criticism. Shadow of the Colossus makes that emptiness, that desolation, the whole point of the experience. There is nothing to do but go from point A to point B, nothing to do in the interim but sit on your horse and ride forward, and no combat to engage in outside of 16 spectacularly designed boss fights, which are more about movement and mini puzzle solving than they are about the combat itself. Shadow of the Colossus is, to this day, considered one of the best and most unique games ever created, and we doubt we will ever play a game that will take our breath away like this classic did. Rocket League. What the hell even is Rocket League? That was a question many of us asked frequently back in the early years of the 8th console generation. Is it a racer? Is it a car combat game? Is it a sports game? The answer, it's all of the above. You drive Hot Wheels-style vehicles in compact arenas, boosting and crashing into opponents while trying to outscore the other team in a bonkers game of football with a stupidly massive ball. It's as ludicrous as it sounds, and it's so much better for it. Fall Guys. The Battle Royale genre has become extremely crowded these last few years, and players are desperately looking for more innovation in that space. Well, no one could have imagined that this is what that innovation would look like. Fall Guys is the most gleefully stupid battle royale game you'll ever play. Thanks to its combination of ragdoll physics, its platforming is absolutely hilarious. Its collection of minigames feel like a caricatured version of what you'd see in something like Takeshi's Castle. All of it works together to ensure that even when you're not winning, you're having an absolute blast. There's a very good reason this game suddenly became the massive success that it did. Animal Crossing. Nintendo, why can you not be normal? The Animal Crossing games are some of the weirdest life simulators you will ever play, if for no other reason than the fact that you live in towns and villages and islands that are populated by talking animals. Everything happens in real time, and Animal Crossing revels in mundanity. You catch bugs and fish, you pluck weeds, you water flowers, you sell fruit, you make friends with your anthropomorphized neighbors. It absolutely should not work. Animal Crossing on paper sounds unbelievably boring, and yet it isn't. It's dangerously addictive and in true Nintendo fashion, takes an unlikely and offbeat idea and goes to town with it. Pikmin. When Nintendo approaches a genre, they usually do so in an entirely unique and interesting way that's unlike anything else on the market, as is evidenced by the numerous Nintendo games that we've spoken about in this feature. This holds true for Pikmin too. Real-time strategy games have a defined template, and there have been few deviations from that. Pikmin not only deviates, and deviates a lot at that, but it also does so while successfully making a real-time strategy concept work on console, which very few other developers have been able to manage to date. With an incredibly simple but flexible control scheme and gameplay mechanics communicated to players visually and intuitively, Pikmin presents players with a take on the RTS genre never seen before, blending in unique objectives, the pressure of real-time limits, a unique setting and aesthetic, and throwing in elements from action-adventure and puzzle games to boot. Nothing else plays like Pikmin. Perhaps that is the reason the series continues to have an enduring fan base, in spite of its relative lack of mainstream success next to Nintendo's other heavy-hitting franchises. Hades. The roguelite and roguelike genres have suffered from one issue for a long, long time. Though repetition and starting from scratch are very much baked into the entire concept, how do you stave off the monotony and exhaustion that can be set in because of that formula? Supergiant Games' Hades answers that question expertly. It's a game where progression is constant, and even on failed runs, you end up making meaningful progress through at least one of the numerous avenues that are always available. On top of that, that structure and repetition that a roguelite game demands is used to ingeniously tell what is an engaging and captivating story. Hades takes its roguelite structure, throws in engaging RPG mechanics, uses it to weave a compelling story, and caps it off with excellent combat and memorable boss fights. There should be little doubt in anyone's mind that this is one of the best games of its genre, and will be a blueprint for others in the space for years to come. Minecraft. Minecraft is the ultimate sandbox game, the game that defines the phrase, anything is possible. It's a game that transcends genres, and it does so thanks to its simple but expansive premise that allows you to basically play with Lego blocks in video game form, and build essentially anything that you can think up. Player choice and freedom is something that video games have been chasing for as long as they've been around, but Minecraft does so in almost absolute terms, allowing you to let loose with unfettered creativity. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.